Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Chapalang Film Podcast. I'm your host, Sepeng. We also have co-host and film director Jonathan Chu. Our guest today is Eugene Seah. He is one of the most in-demand film colorists in Singapore. Welcome to the podcast, Eugene.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
I'll just give a short intro for Eugene. This pre-show bio, I'm just going to put it out there. Right, over the years, Eugene has worked on many indie short films in Singapore. Some of the titles include A Man Trembles by Mark Chua and Lam Li Xian, Time Flows in Strange Ways on Sundays by Giselle Lin, Strawberry Cheesecake by Tan Si Yo, Love at 50 by Tan Wei Ting, Two is Enough by Leon Chiu, and there are a lot of other titles I'm missing out. Recently, Eugene also worked on Nelson Yeo's award-winning feature, Dreaming and Dying. Other than his prolific narrative body of work, Eugene's versatility as a colorist also extends into other forms like music videos, variety series such as the recent HBO's Food Affair with Mark Wines, and TVCs with clients like McDonald's, Singtel, and Razer. And that is my intro. And there's one stack of a resume that we just put out there. Welcome to the podcast, Eugene.
Hey, nice to be here.
Yeah. So, maybe we can share with the audiences a little bit of our history, because Eugene is actually my longtime friend. We go back, let's see how long ago, 17 years. We were friends in the same batch of Ngee Poly Film Sound and Video between year 2006 and 2009. Yeah. So what else do you remember from our days back in film school?
I like to think that back in the day, right? Back in the day, the happy or sad thing, I think I hope now our lecturers are listening in. I don't think I was the best student around. I think a lot of time I spend the bulk of my time trying to hit the required 75% attendance. And in the 75% I was there, I remember and sorry Jacqueline if you're listening, or Melanie if you're listening, sorry for falling asleep during all your classes back then. Yeah.
Right. So actually, from what I remember of Eugene back in school, right, is that he kind of like cemented himself as the go-to editor. Like he was the editing specialist. Like, because film sound and video is a course where everyone just kind of finds what they do. Some people like directing, some people like cinematography, some people realize that they entered the wrong course. But I think in kind of the end of first year or like the start of second year, we all realized that you have a very high aptitude for editing, and you were just like mouse faster than us in everything, in terms of shortcut keys or like rhythm, putting footage together and everything. Like when you're editing, it's just like you could do something that we do in 2 hours, you could do it in like half an hour. So maybe you want to speak a little bit about how you found your groove in that.
So funny enough, it's a bit embarrassing to say this now after all these years, but I think one of the reasons why I got into, of all the things I got into editing, right, was because back then, last time, I was so obsessed with playing computer games and all of that, right, like Dota and Counter-Strike. And I think the closest thing to like playing a computer game was like video editing.
Right.
So that's how I got into it. I think when I was young, me and another former classmate of ours, because we went to the same secondary school together, Ken Whitley Holder, who's also a writer. I think we both wanted to like write and direct and be like famous directors and all of that when we were young, right? And I think like reality hit real hard and real fast that I couldn't direct to save my life. I would go on set and then I'll freeze and that kind of thing. But somehow when you put me behind a computer screen, it's all fine and the magic happens.
Right.
Yeah.
For the audiences out there, right, who do not know, right, there is a Eugene Seah directed short film, right? in FS3, right, that is somewhere out in the universe there. Right?
Somewhere out there.
It is shot on film. Right? I have no idea what the film is about, but I remember helping out there one day. Right, there's a church scene. It's something to do with domestic marriage turbulence or something like that. Yeah.
I can't even remember it. All I remember was my crew being mad at me because I think truthfully back in the day when we were all like 14, 15, 16 years, 16, 17, 18 years, were like I think I was young and terrified. I was like, oh my god, there's so many people on set. I don't know what.
Right.
Yeah, but I think I like to think we all had fun back then.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I think not a lot of people know, or maybe I'm wrong. I think a lot of people know is before you started out as a colorist, you actually had background in editing in the industry, right?
Yeah.
You started out as an editor. Maybe you could just talk us through those few years when you're editor in the industry. Like, what do you learn? Some of your experiences.
Yeah. So coming back to it, going through film school, I kind of realized, or rather, because everybody also came to me for it, right? Like, hey, Eugene, cut my films. I kind of left school with the impression and the idea and the ambition that I wanted to be a film editor. I wanted to cut films. I want to do big narratives and hopefully chase the whole La La Land dream and all of that, right?
Yeah.
So I went through army, did our time like all of us, and when I came out, I started in I hopped around in a few local post houses and production houses, and it became really quick and really clear to me that the dream of cutting films, at least back in the early 2000s and 2010s, when we all first came out of army, that reality wasn't quite happening. And the closest thing to churning regular content on a regular basis back in the day was TV. So I went into television, I went into TV, and there's no other less nice way to put it, but my soul burned.
Could you elaborate the burning?
So I got into doing TV shows and TV programs, and a very nice and polite summary is that a lot of local TV content in Singapore is run like a sweatshop where you are a gear in an entire process and you are just supposed to turn and do your thing, clock in your hours. If you're supposed to clock in more, if you're clocking in more hours than usual, that's normal because everyone else next to you is also clocking in X number of hours. It's a little bit like you know how when we go online, we read about horror stories in Japan or Korea and working overtime, and you're the only guy who's like kind of ready to go at 5, but you look around you, everybody's also working overtime. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Right.
So, yeah, it's like that. Only in film and in television you have a deadline, and you're gonna need to meet it, and you can't go to MediaCorp, for example, and tell them like, hey, so I can't give you your program by X day. Yeah, they'll kill you, right? Because the show has to go to air. So what it means is that somebody, and usually that somebody is me, needs to see the sunset and then the sunrise.
Right.
Yeah.
What were some of the things you were editing at that point of time?
So because when I was starting out, I did everything and everything in TV land. I was doing a lot of non-fiction programs. Whether is it the info ad shows and the non-fiction shows, a little bit of reality stuff. Also on the side, also corporate work, short form work. Once upon a time, I used to do. I did everything, man. I did even the events. I went to do a birthday video. I did wedding highlights. So I've done it all.
Right.
The only thing I never got to do was to work on. I never ever found my way into TV dramas. Yeah, but around that time, the only thing that I think kept me alive was that people like you and some of my other former classmates, because at that point of time, many of you guys would be going through university, going through whether was it Chapman or ADM, and some of you guys would just come to me because of the association we had and go like, "Hey Eugene, can you help me edit my film?" And because back in the day we didn't have knowledge or know-how or the
Right,
budget.
right.
So it's like, can you just do something about color? I don't just do something lah. And I'll be like, huh? Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just here to edit. Because you know how like back in film school we're brought up with the idea that the editor just edits
Yeah.
and there's someone to do audio, and there's someone
Right.
to do effects, there's someone to do all of that, right?
Hmm.
And then we go out into the real world and the real world hits you at that at least when you're an editor starting out, you need to do everything. Everything and everything. There'll be times where in some companies I'll even have to go on set and shoot my own B-rolls.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
such was the life. So yeah, because I needed to do the color for that. In the beginning, because I didn't know Jack, it was a chore. And I'll be like, I'll just be trying to turn the knobs, push buttons, and do something until basically you guys would be happy. I think back in the day it was just more like, hey, this looks great, this looks cool. Yeah. And then I don't know, gradually as the years pass, as I felt more and more just disillusioned with editing as a whole, something came over me. I think because I had more and more gigs where people would ask me to color, or people ask me to do the finishing, which is everything, and
Right.
and something that wasn't logical, nothing rational at all, just came to me one day. I just thought about what if I try to approach coloring as a career lah. And back in the day, because when we all first discovered coloring, we were all in film school. Coloring involved one person, usually somewhere who looks very fierce or very grumpy, sitting in a very dark room in a
VHQ.
Yes, VHQ.
Yeah.
And this is one of the guys that I always remember. One of these days, if you're watching this podcast, Ken Hayashida, one of these days I'm gonna find that fella and sit him down, buy him a cup of coffee, and because he's probably the first person who inspired me to go like, wow, this is so cool. I want to be like this guy.
So VHQ, right? Is this place, is VHQ still around now? No, already, right? Is it still around?
Oh, I think they're still around.
It's still around, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So VHQ used to be at Sunshine Plaza, right? It's in the building. I don't know which floor. And when we used to shoot on film, after the footage is after the film is being processed, it's sent to VHQ, and we will be brought into this dark room to sit down beside the aforementioned Ken Hayashida, who will be our colorist. But what he will do is actually just do a very quick one pass, without really getting into the nitty-gritty kind of things. Yeah. So I think it's very interesting you talk about your start as an editor and how you got more interested into coloring. Maybe speak to us a little bit about that transition period. How was it like for you? Like, what do you have to do? Do you have to like self-learn, or do you have to like go kowtow to some mentor to transfer skills to you? Like, how was that switch of career, so to speak, like for you?
So I think it was around probably was it 2014 or 2015, 2013, 2015 that the thought and the idea of coloring as a career actually entered my my brain. I think what was that film? There was that one film that one year in a year of a lot of unremarkable local films. That one year that hit us all, Ilo Ilo. Yeah, I remember watching Ilo Ilo, and at that point of time, it blew my mind. It blew my mind that Singapore could look like that. There could be that level of polish. It could look like a memory from the 90s. It could look dank, dirty, and ugly, and all of that. And it started leading me down the rabbit hole of how do I, around 2015 or 2016, I started researching about colorists and color grading and all of that, like as a career in Singapore. And to my horror, because how do I put it? It's like this. I think when I like I always have when growing up, I always used to have this idea that if I wanted to learn something, I need to apprentice or go to a place to hone my craft. I did that for editing. I spent 6 or 9 months in this place called Cutting Edge. It's a great place. It was a brutal environment for its time, but it taught me so much about discipline, about avid, about uh about tape discipline and about the whole process and organization and all that, and how to be an editor, how not to be an editor, and all of that. And I wanted to go through that process again. Like I was willing to start from scratch, to serve coffee and tea, and all of that. So I went out to I went on a massive cold calling spree, contacting all the post houses locally. And to my horror, most of the places, most of the established colorists started to leave, started to go freelance. Many of them were they're like, sorry, we're not taking in anybody. Yeah. At that point of time, I think the colorist responsible. I might be wrong, but I think the colorist responsible for like the initial festival pass for Ilo Ilo. I think it is JB Junpin, this female colorist. She's great. I met her and then after that through her, we like I went down to Mocha Chai to have a conversation, but they also told me like, hey Eugene, sorry, you're great, but you're overqualified to be an intern. So eventually going around, there was nobody else that said. The only person that I think also ironically gave me the kick to doing it all by myself was Asman over at Gravitate.
Right. Asman, yeah, I remember.
Asman, and Asman, if you're hearing this, I love you forever because of this. So Asman told me, you know what, Eugene, unfortunately I can't take you in because my company is too small, but I think you have enough potential. I think you should just go for it. You should just learn on the job. Just take anything you can get. Even if he didn't exactly say in a way, but he said do whatever you need to do to take whatever you can and just learn on the job, and don't have regrets that you didn't do it lah. And he was very supportive, and I like to think it was him and a few other of the other senior colorists, including JB and Adrian and Albert, that just told me, you know what, Eugene, we can't train you or what, but no one's stopping you lah. Yeah. And so
Right.
I around 2016, 2017, 2018 onwards, I didn't immediately let go of all my editing jobs. I didn't one day just pack my bags and go, woo! I actually went step by step. So
Right.
I started to try to wind down my edit jobs. And if you remember, I went around. So I first started by going around asking anybody if they had short films. Great. So that's why I always have this. I like to think I always have this very intimate relationship with the indie film community, because it's where and how I got my big break. It was from all of you guys, all of my former friends, classmates, all of these people with their student short films, other kids with their short films, all passion projects. I'll tell people I'll be very I'll be very upfront, and you know it, of course. There were a lot of films that I did for a low price of sometimes a couple of $100, sometimes $100, sometimes 50. Sometimes if it's a friend or someone that I trust, free. I think for me, I went. I mean, looking back, maybe there was some I wouldn't have taken for a low price or free.
Right.
But at the point of time, I felt like I needed to do what I needed to do to get those hours in, to just get anything. And yes, it is also true that there were many of the films that because back in the day, none of us knew what we were doing. many of the films were shot like with less than ideal cameras. Log was a new and it was a new and wild frontier back in the day with
Right.
log and raw video and how to light and expose and color. And I like to think that we all figured it out together.
Right.
And
So yeah, Eugene. For listeners who don't know, can you explain what is log and all the terms that you just mentioned?
sure, okay. So for coloring digital video or digital films, a lot of times when we have video footage, when you have baked in colors, it's oftentimes very hard to manipulate it to the kind of desired looks that we like to achieve. So one of the things that back in the day, last time, what of all people Kodak created, was this thing called a log profile. Basically, what it is that it's a mathematical. It's mathematically the depending on which manufacturer and what the how do you call it? It's the flattest possible image that's captured by your film or your digital cinema camera or your video camera. It looks flat and washed out. It looks ugly. It looks gray and everything. It's not a look. It's not a mood. It's not a vibe. It's a starting point for you to start coloring off.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
that is what log video is.
Cool. So later we'll get back to you about how you start to work very intimately with the indie film community scene. But I think this is the kind of the right time. I think we can talk about what really the job of a colorist entails. Yeah. So what is a colorist? Because for some people, they might think color correction and color grading is the same thing. So maybe you can just speak to us about what exactly a colorist do.
So I like to put the colorist as the person responsible in post for the manipulation of images using color and contrast, amongst many other things. But in short, color and contrast in order to create and achieve the desired look and feel of what the film or the video or the product should be. Yeah. Another way of seeing what the colorist is I like to also think of the colorist as the what I like to call the post extension of what the gaffer represents to the cinematographer or the DP on set.
Right. Okay. What is what's the typical workflow, for you when you are to embark into a color grading project? For example, when you work with a filmmaker on his or her film, how do you go about with that collaboration?
Before I get into that, something I also like to add on is also something that I like to add on is also color correction and grading are two intertwined, sometimes done simultaneously together, but two very different portions. So color correction is actually the what I like to call the fixing or the technical element of the job. So it involves what I like to call the problem solving in terms of the technical element and the technical and the functional aspect of it. Matching two shots together, fixing problems, for example, wrong white balance or wrong exposure, things are too dark, bringing it up, so on and so forth.
Right.
And balancing everything together. Grading is actually the creative aspect of the process, and it's the what I like to call the actual fun part lah, which is the because coming from a editing background, I like to call it this is the part where I'm doing the actual storytelling process
Sure.
of my job lah. Yeah.
Right.
So coming back to the process, generally before I begin, I like to first have a conversation with the director and or the DP. Sometimes both. Some depending on who is chiefly responsible for the setting the signing off the look and the feel. Sometimes if it's a commercial, it might be the agency creative or the art director or the creative director and so on and so forth. And so the first thing I would like to always ask people is I usually go with simple terms because sometimes it's very easy to get caught up in technicalities and miss the big picture. So the first thing I like to ask people is what are you going for, and do you have like tell me what your film or your video or your ad or your MV is about, and sometimes if they haven't begun, sometimes out of curiosity I just like to read the script. I just like to see like if they have a deck or references. I like to have an understanding of what they want to go for. If they already like if they already shot it, sometimes I like to watch an in progress edit to get a rough idea and a feel, and then we'll start talking from there about things they want to achieve, things they want to try and fix, etc. etc.
Right.
Then once I get the all the files, all the footages and everything, it could be anything from a month to a week before to the day before, the morning. And after organizing and everything and prepping, the first thing I'll start is what I like to call color spotting and setting of looks. So what we'll do is typically we'll go through the entire film, or we'll go through the entire piece or the video or the ad or the music video, and we'll just choose like maybe one representative shot or some of the key shots from each scene, maybe one per scene or something. Usually it's the most important shot or the widest master, just for us to visualize, to get a sense and feel of things. And from there I would start to just to play around, just to work in using very simple controls to try and get the rough look and feel of what we're going for. Typically it would be like maybe a 50 or 60% kind of thing, just to test water. And from experience, oftentimes the thing we start with is more often than not never the thing we end with. So it's just for us to start like visualizing together what the piece should be.
Right.
And once we're done with that, once we're happy with setting the rough looks, I'll then go on to do like a first pass, which is basically I like to call I like to use like editing terminologies, because coming from there, you know how like in editing we have like a rough cut or a first cut and then fine cuts and so on and so forth. So I also like to say like same. So I like to have a very rough first pass where I'll just very quickly go through and I'll roughly balance everything together, and at the same time try and get the kind of looks that we talked about. And once that is done, we'll watch everything together, and usually by then we will start to have a better idea of what we want to do. And from there I'll start to go into what I like to call the secondaries, which is advanced keying and color manipulation, doing things like for example, we turn the green slightly towards a warmer hue, towards summer. We turn the red towards blood, blah blah blah. And then once we're done, we'll go through again another pass to do something which is one of the things that I enjoy the most, which is shaping. AKA I like to call it relighting in post. And a lot sometimes long story short, it's the same mantra as how back in the day in edit, if I've done a good job, you most likely can't see it or can't tell it.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
To make it invisible, to not let people realize the hand lah.
Something flashy and loud and in your face.
Right.
If I'm doing like a big major big brand commercial or a big music video, and we need to be unforgettable, I'll give you unforgettable.
Right,
Yeah.
right. It's interesting you you
Yeah.
speak about shaping because that
Mhm.
I suppose also it involves the texture of the film, right? You know,
Yeah.
which also means that you could be giving the film a very natural look, right?
Mhm.
But even that natural look has its own kind of shaping, like the contours and everything.
Mhm.
Uh, and you work on it so minutely
Yep.
just so that people can feel it
Yep.
and not observe the hand that
Someone
is
someone
touching
I
it
work with
that
a lot,
much.
a certain director, I can't remember his name now. He always likes to tell me it needs to be felt, not seen.
Right, right, right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. If you can see it,
Eugene,
it's overdone. So you have to feel it,
right.
as big as that sounds.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Eugene, can you use a
Mhm.
specific like example from one of the short films or feature films you've worked on, and just walk us through how you worked with this particular director and slash or DP?
Okay. I think a very easy one I'll use right now is Dreaming and Dying, because I just worked on that. So Dreaming and Dying is very unique because Dreaming and Dying first started as Dreaming, the short film.
Hmm.
And for those who have watched Dreaming, the short film, it kind of looks a bit similar, and yet, to be honest, nothing like Dreaming and Dying.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
I think
that's true.
I think we all of us made that conscious decision after 3 years on to start afresh
Hmm.
and to tell the story in the best possible way that we can. Yeah. And with Nelson and with Lincoln, I think very early on we wanted to go for in terms of the story, we wanted to go for something that evokes a sense of memory of memory, but not just memory, like memory, but your memories aren't exactly reliable. And nostalgia, but nostalgia that makes you question, did I really say that or did I really not
Right.
say that?
Yep.
Something also along the
Hmm.
line that we wanted to do in Dreaming and Dying was to blur, as the film goes on, to blur the
Yep.
line between reality
Yep.
and the dream state of dreaming,
Yeah.
and what is life, what is death, everything in between. Yeah.
Right. Right.
And
Eugene, sorry, for maybe for listeners who might not have seen Dreaming and Dying, can you try to describe what the film is about?
um okay,
In your best way
I'll try to
possible.
channel some of Nelson. So Dreaming and Dying is about the reunion of it's a high school reunion of three friends who come together after 20 or 30 years, and and through events that happen in the film, they come to realize that some memories that they share together actually lead to more things that they discover about one another. Although possibly a bit too late, possibly not. Yeah. Do watch the film. It's still out in the projector.
Right. Uh, and maybe
Yeah.
you can also speak about the colors and the prominent, because right now we are doing a
Yeah.
podcast and we don't have
Yeah.
the images there. Talk about
Yeah.
the very specific colors and textures that are in the film as well.
Yeah, and before related to what John asked, right? Because before I asked you to like describe what Dreaming and Dying is about, you were talking about the different themes of the film and how you
Mm.
tried to connect the themes of the film to the color that you're trying to grade for. Yeah. Yeah, just
So I
could you just like walk us through the like in terms of your creative process, right? Like what goes behind the scenes into into how you color grade.
so what I tend to do is I tend to try to first I try to visualize what the director and the DP is intending to go for through maybe their
Hmm.
references and through maybe prior working experience and knowledge with them. And then I try to add my own twist and my own spin to things. into if I was them, what would I do, or what can I also do to add on or to do differently when something doesn't quite work, and how can I enhance? How do I get the essence of, for example, when Nelson tells me about a memory, or Lincoln tells me about wanting an image to not be so perfect. What can I do to lean into that? So one of the things that around that time, me and Lincoln were fresh off was another short film called Chompit, which was shot on 16mm film. And because that idea and that memory of 16mm film was kind of fresh in my head at that point of time, I just thought to myself, hey, you know what? What if I try to bring that kind of filminess, that kind of filmy nostalgia into this film? Yeah. And so I started to work the not just the colors, but also the texture of the film, the whether is it in terms of the sharpness, the grain, and the contrast towards visualizing it as if we shot the film on 16mm film, and it's like a at least with the first act of the film in my head, like a warm summer day. There was a certain film that I watched. I'm trying to remember now. It eludes me, but I remember seeing that kind of warm summer hues, and I thought to myself, how do I bring that into Changi Beach and Changi Chalet? At least with the what I call the first act of the film, lah. And as the film progressed, because it has got to do a little bit with Chinese mythology and the whole idea about reincarnation and going through purgatory and everything. I try to bring that element of death and regret into the forest, which is why we start to see more what I like to call it's a mix between depressing hues and regret and still nostalgia.
Right.
Yeah. And by the time we hit the last part of the film, not to spoil too much, but because there's a lot of death in the last part of the film, looks, especially with the last scene, it's just entirely muted to symbolize how the ship has sailed and people are no longer there, and it's just about like regret and reflection and all of that lah. Yeah.
Can you also talk a bit more about the scenes that take place at the swimming pool? So you know the three characters, they lounge around like some kind of Airbnb hotel, and you know they swim about this swimming pool. And I saw that one of the references that Nelson used was David Hockney's swimming pool painting.
Yes.
Right, he shared it on Instagram.
Yes.
So when you are presented with this very explicit reference,
Yeah.
how do you then convert that into your color grading?
So yeah, it hits me that so sometimes people ask me, how do I interpret paintings and all of that? Because it wasn't just Nelson who was showing me paintings. Lincoln also was showing me a couple of stuff, and at first I was like, huh? But after a while, I think but after a while, after I brainstormed for a bit, I started to think about what is it about the painting that Nelson likes, or if I was Nelson, I would like. And it was that kind of different people have different ways to describe it. The way how in my own language and my own vocabulary I'll describe it is that kind of neo-realist surrealism. Yeah. And I started thinking, okay, if I was to make this look like a painting, but in my own way, but also in film, what would I do? And so I started to sculpt the contrast to hit what I felt was my interpretation of not just that painting, but also that picture in my head. Yeah. I like to think that sometimes in editing and coloring, all of us have a very rough or a very vague idea or a very vague picture or series of pictures in our heads of how we like things to look like. and my job is to achieve that in my own in my own head, and to align everybody's together.
Right.
That makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I think Dreaming and Dying has a very unique look to the film. In fact, it is. I know the term evocative gets thrown around quite a bit, but it is indeed very evocative.
Yeah.
It enables the picture to stay in the audience's mind. And this is really because how the colorists work, with the director and the DP to not only push the color in the grade, but also to let you both feel the story in a very subliminal level. And I think that was what you managed to do with the color lah. The greens, they felt Singapore, but they also felt like it's some other world that you are presenting. Likewise with the beach as well. The way the blues are, the way the sun shimmer to it, because sun shimmering in sea, right? We see in 1,000 of films. Some are very dramatic, some are very melodramatic, but to really hit the sweet spot of being dreamy, but at the same time being local as well.
I think
that is
dreamy,
something
but
hard
not
to do.
a dream sequence, or at least not
Yes.
yet a dream sequence.
Yep.
Because to be honest, there's been a series of films, including like A Man Trembles, and stuff that I've always been trying to experiment with the idea of how to make Singapore, and once again I have to credit Ilo for that, because it was the one that got me thinking, how do I make Singapore look not just like the Singapore that we see every day, right? On whether on photos on social media, or on stuff that one Singapore look kind of thing, right? How do I evoke that memory, that emotional memory, and evoke that same kind of, for us that grow up in Singapore, or even like people or tourists, or people who see like images of Singapore, they see, they feel, they have that kind of feeling. I think a lot of times color, the great mystery of color, even to myself a lot of times, is that color is not just something very visual. Color is something very emotional. It arouses that sometimes a very specific, or sometimes a conflicting set of emotions in you when you watch. And I think for me, one can say I kind of half stumbled upon also getting the right emotional response. I think like for me, that was the one goal like I had in mind for dreaming, to be able to hit that kind of that to make people feel that sea of emotions, whether or not you truly understand what is going on. You don't truly have to understand what is going on from a logical point of view, but as long as you feel it.
Eugene, related to the idea of memory, right? I think you can also talk to us about Giselle's latest short film, I Look Into the Mirror and Repeat to Myself. If I'm not wrong, that shot was shot on actual film, right? So
Yeah.
can you just talk to us about like this process of working with actual film stock? When I'm sure they digitize the footage, but you're working with the actual grain and the actual texture of film. And Giselle's film, maybe you could also explain like what the film is about, and a huge theme of the film is, of course, sisterhood, but also about looking back into the past and reflecting on your family history.
So with Giselle's film, I like to say that Giselle's film is a little bit more experimental. So it's to summarize it, it's kind of like a dear diary kind of thing about these five sisters and the relationship they have growing up, and the experiences that they share, and the implications that they imply. So it's when I approach Giselle's film, I kind of approached it from a bit more autobiographical way, like it's kind of like it's also Giselle's own like own like she has her own Super 8 like film camera, and she's kind of recording all these images like memories. So I think at this point of time, very recently I watched After Sun, and it hit me because of the whole idea of memories. So once again, memories. And so I thought to myself, what if the memories in After Sun, instead of being shot on a DV camcorder, was shot on Super 8? So I tried to channel that kind of thought process into doing Giselle's film. Now, so with film, yes, film nowadays tends to be scanned, and with some, like for example 16mm onwards, they tend to give you in that very flat log footage for you to color. With this Super 8, there was actually some, it wasn't in log, so there was already some contrast in and everything. Another part of coloring, another part of a colorist job is also there's one part called knowing when to do things and when to go heavy-handed, or when to go heavy-handed in order to be invisible. There's also another part that's also about knowing when to do as little as possible.
Right.
And the amazing thing with Giselle's film was that most of it, the look of it, right, is actually kind of set
Nice.
by the film stock and the camera and the lens. And she and her DP partner Clyde, the both of them, they are gems. They both are. And so I didn't want to have too heavy-handed an approach, and I feel, to be honest, most of it was light touches to adjust certain scenes to balance and mesh them together, and it was actually for me making sure things were coherent and flowing and felt like a very intimate memory. Yeah. So I think the key word for Giselle's film was keeping the intimacy. Yeah.
Maybe you can kind of talk us through how you, because you work in narratives, and you know, we got a glimpse of how you what your creative process is in there. But you also work on a lot of like corporate ads, and also corporate narratives, right? And these agencies, they come from, they could be in government, they could be, you know, a big corporation. How do you work with them in terms of creative process?
So
What's the difference in the approach?
what I like to say is that because the honest truth is I've done more or less, I think in the last 5 years that I've just been really going at it full steam at color. I think I've done more or less a 50-50 split between all the indie films and indie projects, and the commercial work, the corporate work, the series, the TV and all of that. And one of the things that I learned very early on is that we need to respect the medium. And what it means is that when I'm doing all my indie stuff, all my narratives, and it's going more towards the art side of things, I use one side of my head. I use what I like to call the more artistic side of my mind. That's not to say I don't put craft. I still put my craft into it. But when I work on all these other things, the ads and all of that, that's where I pour my craft, and that's the other half of the brain. Yeah. And what I do is I treat every project. I try to treat every project as uniquely as possible. If I'm doing, for example, tomorrow a commercial starring a certain fried chicken brand, and it needs to be bright and crispy and maximum impact, that's what it needs. I'm not going to turn it into some art film because man, we got to sell fried chicken. Yeah. Or likewise, if I'm doing a documentary about Mark Wiens, or a docu-series about Mark Wiens going around sampling food in Singapore, I'm gonna give Mark Wiens sampling food in Singapore. We've all seen Mark Wiens on YouTube, and it's what so it's also about like in that way respecting the medium.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious, right? Talking about chicken wings.
mhm.
So how do you make chicken wings look super crispy and delicious?
Ah, okay. So a little bit of a shameless self-plug. If any of you guys are tuning in and watching, I think the latest batch of KFC Christmas ads, Dip and Share. So I did those. You guys can have a look. It's all ready, so I can talk about them. Yeah. So I think for those, the challenge was we've got a lot of red because it's Christmas and it's KFC. But how do we? And we've got a lot of people sitting around and it's communal thing. But how do we make the chicken stand out? So
Right.
one of the things that I learned very early on with food products and what is that certain foods, certain drinks, certain beverages have there's a certain shine and sheen to them. And to be honest, the only way to discover this is not just by doing yourself, but by watching hundreds and thousands of commercials, whether it's on fried chicken, on burgers, and just understanding and appreciating what looks nice to eat. What is something like I love KFC, for example. So I put myself in the shoes of a KFC consumer. What is the kind of crispiness that I need to see for me
Right,
to
right, right.
want to eat it? Yeah.
Right. Okay, so this one, right, is interesting because it's
Yeah.
about basically selling a product, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's really attacking audiences' senses to make them feel towards the product in the most appropriate way the the the, the company wants, right? But
Yes.
I'm also curious to know about the process when you are doing, say, a corporate narrative.
Yep.
So you've done a couple of those as well. Singtel
Yep.
comes to mind, right?
Yep.
Corporate narrative, corporate short films, and on the very surface, right, it is also a short film, just like the indie films that we've just mentioned just now. It is
Yep.
still storytelling,
Yep.
but this is translated through a more client-based commercial prism, right?
Yeah.
What do they look out for in the look, and how do they communicate the desired look to you? What is the difference there?
So I think with some of the corporate narratives, I think
Yep.
a recent example was I did a insurance commercial, shot by Cheyenne, for Sabrina Poon. I think it was the agency involved was the Gap People. I can't remember the exact name now. I'll send you later. But I think with that, for example, it's about balancing a little bit of what the director and the DP wants to go for, and also what the agency and the client is okay with. So one of the things with this kind of films is generally with this kind of corporate narratives or corporate commission short films or basically short films that are commissioned by some kind of corporate client or a government client that has some form of agenda, is that they generally want to see some kind of brand identity inside of it.
Right.
So the first thing is to identify what what is the I tend to work this way, which is I tend to first so by getting it out of the way, we tend to be able to nail down what the client truly wants, and then from there we minimize like what I like to call conflict or what the client feels they didn't get paid, what they didn't pay for. So we try to get what the corporate branding or the corporate colors of what the client wants to get, and we see where we can implement it. Oftentimes it's kind of designed into the film, maybe in certain segments, certain scenes, and all of that. And I try to first hit that kind of identity, whether in a subtle way, if it's that kind of film, in a subtle way that's not in your face, or if we need that kind, like if it's Chinese New Year, if it's gonna be red, if it's gonna be Singtel needs to be a certain Singtel red. Singtel red does not look like Starhub green, does not look like M1 yellow. It's
Right.
Singtel red, for example.
Right.
And we try and hit that first. more often than not, surprisingly, sometimes we get creative liberties. Oftentimes it's about first identifying what the client's requirements are, and I feel and I find that a lot of times once we have the client requirements locked down, I think sometimes there's this perception that people go, and I won't get into too much of it, that people go, hey, it's gonna be boring. But I feel oftentimes that more than not, people are actually understanding. I feel that once you're able to give them what they want, they tend to give you a little bit more leeway. Yeah.
Sure.
Of course,
Cool.
that doesn't entail turning the like the film into. It's not gonna look like some camera Dior entry or what that
Right,
is.
right,
Yeah,
right.
but that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that on the other flip side of the coin that I still don't put in what I like to call a certain amount of professional pride and a little bit of artistic integrity. It's about, at the end of the day, balancing it. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
To put it this way, it's like this.
Right.
One way to think about this is that when I do an indie project or a film or a narrative film, my client tends to be my director and DP. So
Sure.
besides, I mean, so what it means is that I just need to satisfy them and also satisfy myself enough so that I can sleep at night.
Right.
And if I'm
right.
doing a corporate piece or a commercial piece, it simply means that maybe there are more people in the room to satisfy. And a lot of times being able to be okay with that helps to make a lot more things a lot smoother and a lot faster, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Speaking of satisfying,
Mhm.
you work with a lot of different DPs, right?
Mhm.
And I'm sure all of them have different ways of working, right?
Mhm.
Maybe you can just talk to us a little bit about how the process is like working with different DPs. You work with Cheyenne, Jolina, Rachel, right? Just
Mhm.
just to name a few.
Yeah.
What is the process typically like with them as collaborators?
So, I like to think that for example, with like Cheyenne, Rachel, Jolina, and Lincoln, the four of them are in some ways similar in the sense of how we're all in roughly the same age group, and the kind of things that we grow up and appreciate are surprisingly a lot more similar than we like to think. But the four of them, like what you say, have four. Some range from a little similar to four very like North Pole and South Pole, different ways of working, different ways of appreciating an image or lighting a scene or going about uh, the process of getting their picture. So, for example, someone like I think when I work, for example, with Cheyenne and with Rachel, I think Cheyenne and Rachel are extremely what I like to call uh process orientated. Not to say that Lincoln and Jolina are not. They are too, but in a very different way. But
Right.
I think with Cheyenne and Rachel, I tend to do quite a fair bit more. For example, more homework in the beginning first.
Sure.
So like with Cheyenne, I like to have very long conversations with him sometimes, and we'll just talk through a lot of images, and and sometimes when, like, for example, Cheyenne or Rachel is on set, sometimes they'll send me images, and if I'm free, I'll just throw a quick grade on the fly, and we'll just talk like that.
Mm.
With Jolina, and with Lincoln, sometimes they do that too, but I feel like sometimes with Jolina and Lincoln, we're a little bit more spontaneous. For example, we we'll still have that all these conversations, but after that, we will spend a lot of time sitting down and experimenting together,
Sure.
in the suite, going through different ideas and being spontaneous,
Yep.
and coming up with something, and more often times than not is what I call quite magical. Yeah, I think
Right.
especially with Lincoln, Lincoln, if you're hearing this, correct me if I'm wrong. But like coming back to like dreaming and dying, I think the idea that we originally had and the idea we ended up with, I like to call what we have a very happy accident. Yeah, nothing like how we initially envisioned
Right.
it to be. Yeah.
What's your take on reference images? Because people like to send reference images, and the like the Blade Runner 204, right? To get the blue, and then there's the blue, the orange hue kind of look and everything. And a lot of these reference images, they come from Shot Deck,
Film grab.
Hollywood films, right?
Yeah.
More often than not. But how do you work with them? Do they sometimes affect you a little bit too much? Like, subconsciously I feel like I'm imitating the look, or you are able to get a glimpse of that and then still be able to see the whole story and be able to make your own thing out of it.
So I like to say that references are important until they're not. Yeah. So coming back to the four of them, like for example the four DPs I mentioned earlier, Shine, Rachel, Julia, and Lincoln, they'll send me like a lot of times they'll send me a ton of references. Sometimes things that are really close to what we want to go for. Sometimes things that have got nothing to do with what we want to go for.
Mm-hmm.
But it's more like I always like to tell people that unless it's like a commercial and we have to hit a very specific Coca-Cola red, that kind of thing, or Pepsi Blue, a lot
Sure.
of times references are not meant to be taken literally. When we the point of references is that we are referencing something.
Yep.
The fear and the trap that I get sometimes from younger directors or DPs is that sometimes people get a little bit too fixated or hung up
Sure.
on this certain blue from Blue is the Warmest Color, for example.
Right.
Yeah. And so a lot of times I like to take references as conversational starting points to have conversations, to talk about, okay, this is the kind of contrast that we're going for example, for our opening scene. It's a moonlight scene in night in a beach. We want to go for this kind of feeling, That's not to say whether we can truly get there or not in Changi Beach is another thing, for example. Yeah.
I remember we both worked on a film together a couple of years ago. This short film called Mama, right?
Yeah.
And we worked together with Rachel because Rachel shot that film. And I remember Rachel and I, we wanted to. Our reference was from this film called Never Rarely, Sometimes Always by Eliza Hittman. This indie film. But the look that we eventually achieved, right? It had very, very little similarity, I would say, to the reference image. And I was pleased it was like that, because we just took that feel and, while after we shot, with the footage and everything, and with the LUT that was designed for it, it became its own thing, and the color that the color grade that was given to it provided it a very emotional texture, right? Maybe you can speak to us about pre-designing LUTs, and maybe explain a little bit about what is a LUT to our general audience.
So, a LUT is the technical definition of a LUT is a lookup table. LUT, lookup table. In short, a LUT. So what a LUT does is that it's actually like a text file, much like how like a .text file or .xml file is, and it's basically a series of instructions to instruct the video to go from point A to point B. So that's what actually truly a LUT is. LUTs can be used in a variety of ways. So LUTs used to be used in a very technical way for us to, for example, in a very layman way of saying, to transform our video from the usual web and broadcast and social profile to without going into too much details, for those technical purists who are listening to cinema, from web broadcast to cinema, things like that. LUTs can also be used to store calibration information when we calibrate monitors and all of that. LUTs can also be used as like what we like to call manufacturer what I like to call the manufacturer's interpretation of Rec 709, aka their I used to call it the broadcast look, but nowadays it's more like the default look of the camera. And lastly, LUTs can be used in creative previous ways to make creative looks. Or for us, a lot of times on set is for us to visualize that. Yeah. So
Understand.
Together hand in hand with references, for example, sometimes with like for example Cheyenne or Rachel or Jolina or Lincoln, when the right film or ad comes along, sometimes if we have time and sufficient prep for it, besides also having that conversation, what sometimes I like to do is to create a very loose set of LUTs, one for each scene, or at least one for each kind of like lighting and environment kind of preset, like a day interior, a night exterior, that kind of thing. And so I'll create very rough, a very rough, probably like a 40 or 50% kind of look and feel of roughly the contrast and the exposure. What I typically tend to get them to do is if they can bring the camera a day before or during recce or even the first day of shoot, or like during pre-lighting days, if they can just shoot something roughly on set on location, I would try to typically design something for them. Now these LUTs are not be all and alls. The LUTs are merely starting points for us to, more often than not, the LUTs are they do two things. It starts that conversation of how we're designing the color. Much like how, coming back to it, like an edit doesn't start when we shoot finish. An edit truly starts when the editor comes in, like I'm sure you can ask the next few days if you're army, for example, the editor will start coming in even before the shoot begins. So it's the same with color.
Yep.
I come in, like having that conversation about doing LUTs and all that is already starting to design the color together. It's kind of like a holistic process.
Sure.
There are
Cool.
some films that the final look and feel of the film isn't too far from the original LUT that we built together. For example, recently I did this short film called Mum, by Jack Min, also shot by Cheyenne. One of the things I did was, because we had, at that point of time, it was brand new. We had the Alexa 35 on set, and without going into too much technical detail, the Alexa 35 it's a brand new camera with brand new color signs. So none of any of the LUTs or pre-visualized looks worked before. So I went down on set and they shot some stuff on the fly, and I actually did a rough look together with Cheyenne and the director Jack Min on the spot, and we got something that we liked lah. And after we came to the grade, it was about getting it was building off it to get something that in the end everyone was in agreement with. Then there are other times, like for example back in the day with Mama. I think initially I did a series of LUTs with Rachel that we really quite liked, but somehow after we shot and we cut everything, we were like, yeah, it works, but can we push it a little bit more? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Because it's much like how sometimes, it's much like how you see something in sequence in the script, it looks great, but when you put it together and after offline, it doesn't quite work that way. Sometimes we need to rejig. So it's the same. I think we went through that process. We went through, like, I think one round trying to get the color to what we liked, and eventually we settled on something that, like what you said, looked nothing like what we originally envisioned, but hey, this is not bad either. Yeah. I think more importantly, it still captured the essence of what we were going for.
Right.
I think that's always the most important thing. The thing I always like to tell people is, is don't be afraid to deviate from whatever we started out with, as long as it's what we it's like we can still see what we wanted to go for. Yeah.
Were there any projects that you really deviated totally and memorable ones, and it turned out quite surprising in a good way? Like the way they shot it is A, but then after that you change it to like not even B, it's like F or Z. It's just like something completely polar opposite.
Shit, I can't think of anything right now. I'm sure there will be.
Right.
Okay, give me a while.
No worries. We can come back to this. We can come back to this later. Right. It must be you're dealing with images and colors every day in a dark room with high intensity, a lot of hours. How do you refresh your eyes? Because sometimes I'm sure you come to a point you're like, oh, I don't know what I'm seeing anymore. How do you kind of like get yourself out of that zone and then return it to again?
I think for me, it's probably easier when I now than when I first started out. I think one of the things I used to do was that I used to set a timer every hour that would just go off. Maybe you might remember it. That I would just physically set hourly timers and remind myself like to get up. So one of the things that I try to do is I try to take hourly breaks if I can.
Sure.
Even up to today, I try and take hourly breaks to just refresh my eyes. I would go outside.
Right.
Typically, I'll work for about an hour or two, and then I'll go outside. I'll take a toilet break, and as I take that toilet break, I'll try and stare at stuff that are green in color. They're far away. I try to recalibrate my eyes for 1 to 5 minutes. And just remember how how skin looks like skin, how grass looks like grass, how trees look like trees, and all of that. Another thing in long term wise, right? Something that I've been a very big proponent of doing is that I try to visit places that have a certain look and a feel. So for the longest time, I was very hardened about how like in LA or what, how could they get that kind of teal and orange back in the day when I didn't know. And it took me all the way till I finally visited the US and visited like SF and LA and California, and seeing that kind of understanding the kind of texture in the air and seeing the light and how the quality of light is so different there. And then going to places like the Faroe Islands, going to Denmark, going to Sweden, going to Scandinavia, and seeing firsthand with my eyes how Scandinavia looks like, why Denmark has that, why Scandinavian ads and films look a certain way.
Right.
Going to Central Asia, understanding why Central Asia looks like Central Asia. In fact, I would tell people this, like for all those who want to become colorists, which is to not just watch as much as you can, but also go out and explore the world. Go and see for yourself. Sometimes you need to it's that life experience of experiencing something and seeing with your eyes, and not through somebody else's very nicely colored video or over colored thing on social media.
Right.
You need to see it with your own eyes to appreciate color and contrast and brightness and all of that. Yeah.
So on that, right, you were saying like Scandinavian films have a Scandinavian look, right? I'm sure you heard of the Singapore look, right? Yeah. To some people, the Singapore look is, something that is more like a brownish look, and then mixed with some kind of low contrast. But I guess it kind of shift over every few years, right?
Yeah.
to you, what is the Singapore look? Or rather, do you think we have such thing as a Singapore look? How do you achieve it, as a colorist?
So I think every country and every region and every environment has its own unique
Yep.
look. The problem, for good or bad, with Singapore is that we are in the equator, and being in the equator, we have the harshest possible sunlight. I had a very long and illuminating conversation with two very senior DPs, Alan Yap and Adrian Tan, who have graciously given me hours of their time ranting about the light in Singapore and doing the best that they can all the time, to mitigate that lah.
Yeah.
And we see it even when, for example, when big Hollywood productions come to Singapore, when Crazy Rich Asian comes to Singapore, and Westworld comes to Singapore, and they can't quite escape it too.
Right.
And
Eugene, can you talk more a bit about this Singapore light? What's the issue with this Singapore light?
well, I feel the problem with the Singapore light is that I'm sure my DP friends can elaborate more, and they'll probably go into huge rampages about it. But for me, I feel like Singapore's light is extremely harsh, and because we're in the equator, it keeps changing very very quickly. We, unlike in like European or like Europe or America, where generally when your sun rises, and from the time the sun rises till the sun sets, apart from the changing shadow on the ground, the quality of light is roughly about the same on a bright sunny day, of course. In Singapore, it always keeps changing. We always have some form of light continuity from 12:10 to 12:20, 12:20 to 12:30. Sometimes 12:15 to 12:20 looks already drastically different.
Right.
Yeah. And because of that, it's always a challenge to get consistency and the kind of quality of consistency that we need to get. Yeah.
How do you combat that? If that's the right word. this ever changing light. When you are embarking on
That's
a
a
project,
good
do you
question.
use color to kind of compensate with the lack of nuance and light? Do you
I'll
fake
write a book
light?
and I'll start a course and make millions of it once I hit the correct answer.
Right.
But
Yeah.
anyways, so far what I do to deal with it is, depending on the project, sometimes I just embrace it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think at the end of the day, there's no escaping what makes Singapore look like Singapore.
Sure.
Unless you're gonna do like which I've done before on a commercial, entire sky replacement to replace, for example, East Coast Park, and turn it into a fanciful game world.
Yeah.
Short of doing heavy-handed things like that, sometimes we just have to embrace
Right.
whatever sky that we get, and we try to bring what I like to call maximum emphasis to everything else but the sky, the light, the exteriors, unless that's what we need lah. Yeah.
I'm sure you hear of this term a lot. This is a term that we are all guilty of always using. Can you make this film don't look like Singapore? Can you kind of dive into this simplistic yet maybe underlyingly quite complicated statement that you might hear
I think
a little bit too often?
A lot of the recent films I did all have this thing. How do we not make Singapore look like?
Yeah. Where does that come from?
when-
Where does that come from?
The truth is that when people say don't make Singapore look like Singapore, what they're trying to say, right, is can we don't make our film look generic?
Right.
It's the deeper underlying meaning behind not making Singapore look like Singapore is to not make our film look generic and samey like the rest. And so because what is even the meaning behind not making Singapore look like Singapore? You want to make it look like New York? We don't have a New York skyline. right? You want to make it look like Scandinavia. We don't have the kind of flatness of that kind of quality of light. But coming back to that's something like for example, that's what something that we try I try to start nailing down the intricacies of that. With, for example, with A Man Trembles, it was, can we don't make Singapore look like present day Singapore? Can we make it look like it's something that was from 1997?
Right.
Because it's roughly when the 97, 98, when the economy crashed, the whole recession, blah blah blah. And so it was things like that. And generally I try to go in depth when people say that, oh, can we don't make Singapore look like Singapore? I'll be like, then what? Yeah, we're trying to nail it down from there.
Right.
So
Of course,
how do you achieve the look of 1997 Singapore?
well, how? Yeah, how?
Imagine imagine a world where global warming is not that serious.
So what I did was I took a lot of together with Lincoln the DP, we took a lot of old photos of the 90s and looked at what the 90s represented to us. And one of the things that I feel, the growing up, the 90s had a certain grit and grunge. I think a lot also it was due to a lot of films of that era not being very clean when they were scanned and stuff like that lah. And it's just the environment. So I tried to replicate that kind of grit, that kind of not very clean, kind of like what you see that's supposed to be white in color is a little bit earthy yellow. The greens are not very fresh green. They're a little bit more mustard yellow, that kind of thing. Everything looks a little bit old and a little bit faded, but not like 80s faded. Yeah, old but not too old. If that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm also curious, like, can you just give our listeners a sense of the timeline when it comes to color grading a feature film as compared to a short film? Short film sometimes, 1 or 3 days you can finish grading a shot. How about a feature? Like, what's the usual timeline that you get?
So most like short films, like what you said, I grade in 1 or 2 days, maximum 3. Generally, nowadays it's tend to be 2 days. So the first day is the whole, like what I say, the spotting, the first pass and everything. And usually the second day is tweaks and all of that already. With features, it's a little bit more. It's because features are a lot longer. Features we tend to average out at roughly about 7 to 10 minutes a day. So by that we usually use a ballpark of that to start estimating our time. So for example, if a film is 90 minutes long, it will take a minimum of 10 days, for example. And then with additional days of fine tuning, it could be 10 to 14 days. Sometimes if we have VFX or we have complicated scenes, it'll stretch all the way to 20 days lah. Yeah. So so far I've done 3 features. 2 are docus, and Dreaming and Dying is my first narrative. So with Dreaming and Dying, it took me a total of. Dreaming and Dying was a little bit faster because most of the shots were long takes that are quite like blocked off. So there wasn't a lot of changes, so it was more nailing down. And Dreaming and Dying, the advantage of that was that more or less the entire first act, I've kind of seen it before 3 years ago already. So I think I took 7 to 10 days. Yeah, with Dreaming and Dying. With my very first feature, Andre and his Olive Tree, it was a documentary, and with a mixture of footage that they shot and with a lot of archival from, even with the footage that they shot, the actual documentary and interview stuff, because it was kind of also a semi-passion project when it first started. It was shot with literally any camera they could get their hands on. So I think it was shot with more or less the entire range of Blackmagic, all the way up to the 4.6K at a point of time before the pockets came out lah. and then there was a C300, there was an A7S, there was a old Panasonic, there was broadcast camera, there was everything lah. Yeah. So it's more about keeping it coherent. With Andre and his olive tree, at that point of time, I did it on and off. It wasn't continuously, it was a few days here and there, on and off over a period of 3 months. I think it was because it was also my first feature. I wanted to take a little bit more time to just finesse and fine tune with all the different cameras and different stuff I needed to match. So I think it took 16, 17, 18 days, thereabouts. Yeah.
And let's take it as like 10 days of grading, like correction and grading for a feature film.
Mhm.
What's the expected like market rate for those 10 days?
So usually it's in terms of rates, it's kind of, I think it varies project by project and also by what their budget is. What I can speak for myself is that in terms of rates, for those also listening in who want to 1-800 hi Eugene after this, for short form work that's like 5 minutes and under, whether is it ads or stuff, I go at 1,500 a day for like a full 8 to 10 hour day. For features, I tend to start long form work, whether it's series or features, I tend to start at 1,000 a day, and depending on how many days we're going at, and all that, sometimes I might package it down and negotiate with the producer accordingly, depending on what their budget constraints are and all of that. Yeah.
So for a short film, it would be between like 2 to 3K.
Generally speaking. So I also have this policy. If these are for what I like to call the general commission project and paid work. On the side also, I also tend to do student projects or all those kind of passion projects. Those I typically go at a more discounted rate. Generally something comfortable with the kids. Yeah. The important thing for me is when it's a proper project and a commission thing, we talk money properly.
Because we know for the listeners who don't know, Eugene also help a lot of up and coming filmmakers. A lot of them are in film school, and quite often or not, their projects are passion projects. Means that the funds are a bit low. What drives you to help out these younger filmmakers with their films? It seems like a thing that you are very driven in doing.
So
is it like, oh, you remind me of myself when I was younger? I see you in myself. kind of.
I think the thing is that I tend to have a balance, of course, of what I like to call the rice bowl projects. So those I think are always important, because at the end of the day we all got bills to pay. But at the same time, I like to think that I got my head start from doing all this indie work, and we know how things move very quickly in this industry. Yesterday's students and interns will become tomorrow's colleagues and even bosses. Well, I think all of us, we've seen one time too many that former student of yours that you taught a few years ago is suddenly someone who becomes a director or an agency creative or the client even. And I always like to there's one thing I learned very early on, which is never look down on the little man or little like the little boy or the little girl, because you never know where they are. And as such, I like to also think that a lot of times doing the doing all this like student or indie work is also a time when two things happen. Number one, I get a lot more leeway to experiment, to try things out, because it's a lot more, like I call it, low risk, low pressure, compared to like sometimes when especially when we do commercials, sometimes we have 10 people in a room, 20 people in a room, and gotta make everyone happy. It's a very different environment lah. Yeah.
Yep.
it's a perfect opportunity to experiment, to test things out, and also not to disparage. Sometimes students, and it's also the perfect time for them to make mistakes. Sometimes some student films or some indie, some of the lower end projects, some of the passion projects tend to have stuff that's not the best shot per se, and that's the point of time where I always try to be an optimist about things, because I like I've had other colleagues moan and complain about needing to fix people's mistakes before we can even get on to the fun things. The way I like to see is that this is the number one. This is the perfect opportunity for people to fail, because if I like always think that success is born from failure. That's one, and number two, if we don't even try to learn how to fix problems, not to say that all of us don't have enough problems to fix every single day, but if you don't go out to fix problems, then how do you know how to deal with issues when you're doing a big feature or big series or big commercial?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
I like to think that one of the reasons that I can be where I am today is because of all the work I've done, and not just the stuff that I've talked about, not just the more glitty and illuminating and inverted comma well shot ones, but also the ones that are less than ideally shot.
Right.
Because it's through all this that the more we I feel that the more you don't run away from problems and the more you embrace and deal with them, the more you are well equipped to know what to do in the future.
Right. So these days,
Mm.
Eugene, what inspires you? What keeps you creatively stimulated? Just now you mentioned briefly about going to other countries, looking at the texture and outlook of this places. Other than that, what are the things that creatively inspire you? It inspires you.
So I think for me it's I just like it took me like more or less what 10, 15 years coming out of film school to finally rediscover my love for watching films. I owe a lot of it to my partner, who's, even though she's not in this industry, I think she watches more films than all of us combined.
Mm.
Yeah, that kind of thing, and it's just, I think growing up I've always wanted to tell stories, to entertain people, and to do films lah.
Mm.
And I think for me, I like even whenever I'm not doing anything, I just watch stuff. I go out to experience stuff. I just watch random, where is it, from your Vimeo stuff pics to 新片场 stuff pics, the Chinese equivalent, to ads, to music videos, to everything and everything lah. I think
Yeah.
I think I have a like it's that insatiable appetite to continue to grow.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
all of us we're always on a journey,
Mm.
and even if we're good, we can always be better.
Mm.
Yeah. And
Cool.
and so that's for that lah. And also I've like, in terms of like with social media, I think it becomes a lot easier to follow peers or I wouldn't say idols or mentors or people you look up you look up towards.
Mm.
Yeah.
Cool. So with that, we have come to the last section of our podcast, which is our quick fire questions, right? So normally we'll give the guests like two choices and they will choose between these two options, right?
MCQ, okay.
Yeah,
Can.
yeah, MCQ between two choices. Okay, so our very first question is quite cock, this question.
Come.
In this unique circumstance, if Da Vinci is down for a year,
Oh no!
would you use Adobe Premiere Color Pro color wheel to color correct, color grade, or Magic Bullet?
How can I say baseline? Oh shit, it has to be one or the other.
Yeah.
Probably whichever gives me the most control. I think Magic Bullet still.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any experience using Magic Bullet? And maybe you could enlighten some of our audience. What is this Magic Bullet
So
software?
Magic Bullet is Magic Bullet looks, and Magic Bullet is a plugin suite. That used to be very popular back in the day. When Premiere first came out, before Premiere came out with the whole Lumetri color, and started to revolutionize all of it. So it's basically both a color correction suite and yes, pre-built looks into it lah. Yeah. Lumetri, the Lumetri color panel now has improved leaps and bounds, but sometimes I feel it's still too rudimentary. Not to say that the Magic Bullet suite, although I must confess I haven't touched it in years, it could have improved a lot better, much like what I hear about the FCPX color board and color wheels too.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah.
Next question. Would you prefer to design the look and color before the film is shot or after the film is shot?
Well, I want to say before, during, and after. Shit, I can only choose one. That's very difficult. I think I'll still say before lah. Yeah.
As in, yeah, why would you prefer before, and why is your best preference still before, during, and after?
So, I often like to say that by the time if I only come on board after everything has been edited, sometimes it's a little bit too late. Because what it means is that if people have already shot things a certain way and want to make it look another way, oftentimes it's kind of like a rescue job. Yeah. As compared to if I can come in as early as before, at least I can start like advising and we can start having that conversation. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, the next one. I'm going to give you two film choices. And these are your two common color grade references. Blade Runner.
Walao.
Or
the old one or the new one? The new one.
New one. Blade Runner. You can even you can even visualize what images come to your mind already. Blade Runner 2049. Or Joker, the new one. Joker. Why is it? What about the look? Do you feel more gravitated towards?
So remember what I talked about, like seeing seeing something and liking something versus feeling something.
Yep.
I feel that while Blade Runner had a very strong visual look, Joker stuck with me.
Okay.
The look and the feel and the mood and the visuals of Joker sticks with you.
Right.
You see.
Cool.
Yeah.
Actually, John,
yeah.
Sorry, Eugene, you finish first.
Yeah, so it's something that's, once again, it's not logical. There's no math or science or logic involved in it, but you know it when it sticks with you.
Sure.
John, I want to ask. I didn't know people like to reference these two films. Is there any reason why, especially Joker?
Honestly, I have no idea why, but because I teach, right? And then you know, sometimes they have to submit their mood boards and their reference boards, right? And these two films, right? It's very, very prevalent. Yeah. Sometimes for no rhyme or reason, sometimes with sincere reason, but they are very popular. And I also have seen in some like color sessions, you know, some colorists, they will use it as their inspirations. Not inspirations, but just kind of collage of images to kind of refer to as well. So,
in fact, what would be your two films? Yeah, if John is Joker, what would two of them?
This is not my two films, but or rather, I don't have the scale of that project yet to even reference these two films.
Yeah. Hit me with two random films. Come.
Wow. I mean, it's really film dependent, right? I mean, project dependent. So it's really hard to.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It can be anything you like, or it can be random. Like for example, like Dune versus the Batman,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right. Okay. I don't know why, but
Uh-huh.
Asghar Farhadi's Separation.
Oh.
I feel like I always, at least in the past, the kind of films that I would have made was in this kind of vein. It's like contemporary people dealing with their problems.
Mm-hmm.
So A Separation was always a film that I looked to. Yeah.
So Eugene, being inspired, right? I'm going to give you two more choices, right? But I'm going to give you the art house film student options.
Hit me.
Api Chapong, Uncle Bunmi,
Walao. Okay.
or Edward Young's EE.
Uncle Bumi. Oh my god, I sound so pretentious now.
No lah, not pretentious lah. It is a very hard look to achieve. In all honesty, it's
But okay,
such
to be fair, right? To be fair, it's a very unique. It's
very unique. It is unique. Much
imitated.
imitated, hard to be equal. Yeah.
Yes.
Why will you choose that over EE? Because their country near the equator malls.
Reason, I think until then, the first time we saw it in film school all those years ago, we watched it, right? I think back in the day last time. And then I think all of us were like, huh? And I think it was so, there's something about it that was very striking, especially at night. And then after that, the dream sequence, or is it the when it came out and all of that.
Yep.
Like he just stuck with me. Yeah.
Nice.
Right, Eugene, I got a question. It's not a multiple choice question, but you know Vittorio Storaro, the DP?
Yep.
He has a certain personal philosophy about color, and he wrote this very thick book about basically his color philosophy, right? So I'm curious. I'm curious. Do you have a certain philosophy about color?
I think if anything, it's needs to feel rather than a film needs to first feel right rather than look right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Or rather, maybe your color theory, right, is those website one analogous color, complementary color, monochromatic.
I think for me, I like to say that I'm not a very I mean, I know my craft. I know what buttons to press. We can talk about color science or what separately after this. I can talk about camera and lock spaces and aces and all that and VFX. But for me, I'm very big on like going by feelings, going by my gut, and going by I'm always like ever since last time in film school, I'm always a big believer in emotion trumping over logic. That's not to say I'm hoodwinking people. Actually, not thinking about it. Possibly, I'm hoodwinking people. A lot of times, like if it feels right, naturally, our brain will start to rationalize it accordingly. Or if we want it to, oftentimes, if we want something to look right but feel wrong, because we want to incite a certain kind of feeling in people. Like I think the best way of contemporary speaking, the best recent example was probably like Haunting of Hill House. You guys watch it?
Saw the trailer.
Okay. Yeah. Let's just say, without going too much, the parts that are meant to look scary and the parts that actually look scary. Okay. Actually, saying that is kind of spoiling the whole series. Go ahead, give it a watch. Yeah.
Right. No, actually, what I really wanted to ask is, do you believe a certain color is by definition connected to a fixed emotion. So, for example, right, people always say, if it's the color red, it's always anger. If it's blue, it's sadness. Can there ever be a scenario where you show the
Not
color blue
necessarily.
and the audience feels angry?
So I agree and disagree that I feel that yes, there are some primary colors that science has shown that we tend to, because of association growing up and kind of things that we are exposed to, we tend to associate with certain emotions. But a very good example of a film would be Blue is the Warmest Color, where even the use of blue hues, for example, in the beginning of the film, symbolizing, like innocence and purity and hopefulness, or the parts where the blues are a lot more saturated when the couple is together and they're a lot happier, and towards the end with how the blues are just there but kind of muted and dead to show the end of the relationship. There are many ways you could use color. So if you notice, even when I talk about all the films I work on, I've never truly spoken about using very specific kinds of, like, I feel that's one way of working things. If you notice, I've never ever truly explicitly talked about very strong use of certain purple, a certain brown, a certain blue, and what. My philosophy is, yeah, you could use it that way, and sometimes if I have to, I will. But more often than not, for me, it's the combination of everything to evoke that feeling. Or sometimes it's even the absence of it to evoke a certain kind of feeling that we want to get from people. Yeah.
Nice.
So it's maybe in a way it's I'm not a traditionalist in that sense. Yeah, I wouldn't just use red for the sake of red. Red being like anger or happy. I won't use purple or what just because. Yeah. But I mean I can tell you that for example I have a certain affinity sometimes for magenta. That's just how my eyes roll. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next question.
Come.
Simple one. Digital or film?
Walao. Digital.
Digital. Okay. Why? Even though you love film.
Yes. The people who know me actually know that if given a choice, I would love to do film. Heck, I'd love to like do the whole Dune or Batman thing and let's shoot on digital and we print back to film and scan it again. I think in today's day and age, it's a similar question to Eugene. Should I use a smaller camera, but have leftover budget for more lights, more lensing, and more everything, or should I go for a very big, big cinema camera and have no more money left? Tell you to go for that smaller camera.
Yep.
So it's the same idea, just for pure practicality's sake.
Sure.
Digital. Also, the problem with sometimes with film is that with film you have to be really careful with what you shoot, and you really have to have your intention and everything in mind. That's not to say you can't change things, but your error margin's a lot smaller. Now, I'm not advocating. Once again, I'm not advocating shooting first and thinking about the grade later. We don't roll that way no more. I hope.
Cool.
Well,
Okay.
I'll just also lastly I'll put it this way for people that worry. Recently on Dreaming and Dying, on 2 separate or 3 separate audience Q&As. Dreaming and Dying, for full disclosure, is shot on digital. It's not just shot on digital; it's shot on small cinema cameras that are the cheaper and lower end stuff. A Blackmagic Pocket 4K and an A7S III. But some audiences have mistaken it for film. Yeah. So
I heard about that.
nowadays the line between let's just say I try not to make a big fuss out of it. But if you need me to make something that looks like film, if we can meet the right conditions, nowadays it's very hard to tell already.
Emotion, film emotion.
Yeah, film emotion. Recently, I worked on a film shot on 35, and it was so clean. It looked like digital. Yeah.
So
the
ironic,
opposite
right?
too. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. 35. Crazy. Okay, so we have come to the end of the podcast. Again, both Seping and I, we really want to thank you for taking your precious time to join us and really illuminate us alongside our audiences on the craft of colorist, of a colorist. And I think all of us really can speak about your dedication to the craft, and what you do is really very inspiring to this industry. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. And with that, we've come to the end of this episode of the Chapalang podcast. See you next time.
Thank you. See you.